Do you feel close to her or not? No. Do you feel close to your children? No. Do you feel close to anyone? No. Are you able to tell His Honour what you are like as a father to your children? I feel that I can't be a father to my children because I haven't got the skills. Justice Gray wonders how well rehearsed this answer was before the performance. He does not doubt its sincerity, but it is out of character for Bruce, relatively prolix compared to his earlier answers. Nevertheless, again, Burnside has adduced a telling piece of testimony. What sort of things do you do with them or have you done with them in the past as a father? Have you taken them on holidays or picnics? No. Did you ever play with them when they were little kids? No. Have you ever hugged them or cuddled them when they were little kids? No. Why? Just haven't felt close.
Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast, sponsored by Pantera Press. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
Hello and welcome to the Good Reading Podcast. I'm Pip Leason. I'm speaking with author, legal academic and politician Dr. Tony Buti. All the way from Western Australia. Tony, thanks very much for joining me.
Lovely to be with you.
On Christmas Day in 1957, Ngarrindjeri man Joe Trevorrow admitted his 13-month-old son Bruce to Adelaide Hospital with gastroenteritis. Within days, Bruce was living with another family, and Joe would never see his son again. In his new book, A Stolen Life, The Bruce Trevorrow Case, Tony meticulously and empathetically chronicles the story of Australia's first and only successful stolen generations claimant, the irreversible anguish of a broken family and a 13-year battle for justice. Tony, to start out, can you tell us a bit more about how you came by this case?
Yeah, so look, I was, as you mentioned, I was a legal academic, but prior to that I used to work at the Aboriginal Legal Service of Western Australia. I think I joined them in about 1994. And on my first day there, I was given this file with one sheet of paper that just had a bit of a history of it, and an Aboriginal man who'd been removed from his family and had been raised on a mission. Anyway, I didn't know what to do with this file. I had no idea of the practice, previous practice of governments of removing Aboriginal children in a systematic way. So, the boss of the Aboriginal Legal Service at the time was Robert Riley, and he was also removed. And he came and saw me and said, "Look, we need to do a project." And as a result of that, we ended up interviewing about 500 people in just under 2 years and made submissions to the National Inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families. So I had, of course, a professional interest and then an academic interest. And we had also been looking at trying to take the state of West Australia on behalf of our clients, and it was proving very difficult in a legal sense. And there'd been some cases in Australia, even High Court case, all been unsuccessful. So there was no doubt that the success rate was demonstrably bad in trying to win a case for the stolen generation against the various state jurisdictions. So, of course, when the Trevorrow case was decided, the judgment was handed down the 1st of August 2007. I, of course, was very interested in the case because it received quite a bit of press coverage. So I sat down and read the judgment, which was a beautifully crafted judgment by Justice Gray. And I wrote an academic article that appeared in a law journal. And then I thought, this case is very significant, and I really want to bring the case and the life of Bruce Trevorrow to a wider audience, not just the legal academy. So that was really the basis of the motivation behind taking this story further.
Mm. Well, on that note, Bruce died in 2008 at just 51. Can you tell us a little bit more about him and his life? Yeah.
So he was 13 months old on Christmas Day, as you mentioned, 1957, when he was... he had stomach upsets. He was his mother and father at that particular stage had separated. It wasn't a permanent separation, but he was with his father, and his father walked the 1 mile from the camp where they were living into the town of Ngarrindjeri in the Coorong region of South Australia, made famous by the film Storm Boy, and asked for the police officer to find an ambulance to take his son, Bruce, to hospital. No ambulance could be found. He then went to a relative who then drove Bruce into Adelaide, to the Adelaide Children's Hospital. And then on the 6th of January, Bruce was fostered out to a white family, a non-Indigenous family, without the consent or knowledge of his parents, who were actually lied to. There's a famous letter that was used in the court proceedings, written by the authorities. So basically, Bruce's mother, Thora, was trying to find out where her son will be coming home, and the letter in reply said he's not well enough. The doctors are saying he's not well enough to come home at this stage, which was an absolute lie, because by that stage he was living with a foster family in the suburbs of Adelaide. So that was the beginning, and he was raised by this foster family to the age of 10, and didn't know he was Aboriginal till he was about 8 and a half, when he was told by his foster sister. Then he did get to meet his biological mother, Thora, and his 3 older siblings when he was about 9, around 9, in Adelaide. Then on the summer holidays, he was sent down to stay with Thora for 2 weeks, went back to his foster parents. Then, without being warned or told that he was actually being removed permanently back to his biological mother, at the age of 10, he was sent down to live with his biological mother on a permanent basis. Wasn't able to say a proper goodbye to his foster mother, who'd raised him to that age. And he found it very difficult to cope in now what was a foreign environment for him with his biological family. And then for the next 8-9 years, it was a history of institutions and also petty crime and the commencement of abuse of alcohol and other substances. He then travelled a bit around Australia, ended up eventually in Victoria, married, lived in Victoria, tried to come back to his home country around Ngarrindjeri, tried to reconnect with his family and culture, could never do it. And then finally, in the 90s, after the Mabo decision, he walked into the solicitor was working for the South Australian Aboriginal Legal Service, which is called the Aboriginal Legal Rights Movement. And he talked about his case, whether there might be something he could do. And from there, we started the 13-year process, which finally led to the successful judgment.
Mm. It's a harrowing upbringing and a quite a tragic life that it seems like he led in the most part. His case stands out in amongst tens of thousands of other children who were also forcibly removed from their homes and families. How is it that Bruce has been the only successful claimant against the government?
Yeah, well, there's a number of reasons. Factually, his case was very, very strong, and that's for a number of reasons. There was documentary evidence that his parents were lied to. There was also legal opinion that was able to be submitted in court, which clearly showed that the authorities at the time had legal opinion from the state solicitor stating that the only way Aboriginal children could be removed from their families was either by the consent of their parents and or a court order, which neither of that didn't happen in this case. So they knew what they were doing was unlawful. So that's number one. Number two, Bruce presented as a very damaged witness. He was very damaged, and he presented as a witness in the stand, a very reliable witness who looked very broken. And thirdly is the fact that his siblings, his two brothers and one elder sister, who were not removed and grew up with their parents and in an Aboriginal environment and a close connection to their culture, while they had their own difficulties in life, they were able to work through that because of their family bonding and their cultural connections, and they became pillars of the Aboriginal community and even one of them ended up going on an overseas lecture circuit and even lectured at Harvard. So they were kind of like a control group, not removed, were able to work through any difficulties. Bruce was removed from his family and culture, and he couldn't cope with the challenges of life. So there was those factual scenarios. And then when it comes to the legal issues, you had a judge that was prepared to listen to the arguments, listen to the legal cases being presented, and write a balanced judgment. Where I have to say, in some of the other cases, not all of the other cases that were not successful, you do have to wonder if the judge had made up his mind before he had heard the evidence. And also, it was just there was a different read of the historical facts in this case, and where in some other cases the historical facts have always been read in a negative manner against the litigant, which is a stolen generation member.
With this, can you tell us what making a successful claim might have meant for Bruce and his family?
Well, after the successful decision, he felt relief, and he felt that finally someone believed him and someone cared. And he actually asked Julian Burnside to write a letter to the judge to thank him very much for listening to his story and recognising his, the plight that and the suffering that he had undertaken as a result of that life journey. So in that aspect, there was a personal satisfaction, but it didn't. He was still a broken man, and there was a monetary compensation award of $525,000. And that, of course, was of some assistance to the family. And then when he returned back to country Victoria, he kind of became a bit of a local hero to the young Aboriginal people in the town. And so it meant, I think, a personal recognition of what he had been through. And, of course, there would have been, some financial relief for his family.
Well, on a broader scale, what do you think the ramifications of this particular outcome were for broader Australia?
Yeah, look, that's interesting. So this decision was handed down 1st of August 2007, and then in February 2008 we had the parliamentary apology by Kevin Rudd, which was his first act as Prime Minister in Parliament. And Bruce was there in Parliament for that event. You know, that was a very significant event in the Australian parliamentary history, I would have thought, and for the nation as a whole. So I think what this case did was that it provided finally a legal recognition that there were people like Bruce in our history, and that is that were treated by the authorities in a way that we would not have expected. And there's always been a debate about, whether we should call it stolen generation or shouldn't we call it stolen generation, depending on how a person was removed. And that's a fair enough argument. But in this case, there's no doubt that Bruce Trevorrow was stolen from his family. And it is difficult or very doubtful that he would have been the only person ever removed in such circumstances. So I think it provides verification that there were people that were stolen. Not everyone. Sometimes people were taken to missions with the consent of the family, whether it was informed consent, that's another issue. So there's a legal recognition. I think that was very significant, and also it then turned the politician's mind to the need to provide reparations outside the court system, because it's a very laborious, expensive process to go through the court system, and if the state had to defend hundreds and hundreds of cases, it would be very, very expensive. Now, interestingly though, the Tasmanian government had introduced a reparation model prior to this decision, and straight after this decision, the South Australian government, who did appeal the decision and were unsuccessful in the appeal on most points of law, they said, well, we'll be looking at bringing in a reparations system, which they did, but unfortunately it took them about 8 or 9 years before they actually did it. But I think it did bring people's minds to the fact that we need to look at non-legal methods of trying to find a reparation model to assist, and also the fact that, yes, the courts will in some cases recognise what was done was unlawful. Well,
as you mentioned, Kevin apologised in 2008, and I'm sure for a lot of the non-Indigenous population, that apology could seem like a bit of a lid on the past, that injustice is over. How much do you think as a country we have actually progressed in our institutional treatment of Indigenous families?
Yeah, it's difficult. Look, I now am a parliamentarian, so I suppose I'm in the system to some degree, but there's no doubt governments are more aware of the need to try and ensure that Aboriginal families stay together. Now, the converse of that is that in some cases there is a need for a child to be removed from their family, whether they're Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal, on the basis of neglect. And that's, to me, that's what it should be the case. If someone is being neglected and there is no other solution, they should be removed. But the difference here with the stolen generations was that they were being removed purely because they were Aboriginal. Whether they were, in the Trevorrow case, it was quite clear that the children, including Bruce, were never neglected, and while they lived in relatively rudimentary facilities, the authorities always said it was clean and it was fine, and they went to school and so forth. So Bruce was obviously removed because he was Aboriginal. So I think we've moved from that, but of course we still have a long way to go, and there is, saying that someone's racist is a big call, but we've had instances like last night on TV. There was a documentary on the great footballer Adam Goodes. So there is still much to be done in regards to fighting racism and trying to bring about reconciliation and justice to historical wrongs.
Mm. You're a legal academic, and a politician. Those are two careers with a bit of a reputation for being erudite or alienating for a lot of people. Yet, while factual and informative, your book is also emotionally charged with a strong empathetic narrative. Why do you think it's important to cut through the jargon and bring legal and political stories to the public?
Well, I'm really pleased that you've asked that question, because that's part of the motivation behind writing this book. What we don't do very well in Australia, I think, compared to the US. In the US, there's numerous books that have been written on legal cases that are beautiful, that are very accessible to the non-legal public, and bring these cases to a wider audience and bring them alive. And I just don't think we've done that very well in Australia. There's been a couple good examples in regards to the Mabo case, and I just thought, if I could have wrote a very fine legal text for law students and lawyers, but that would be a very small portion of our population. And I just think to try and get the discussion, and look, whether we need to have a great discussion on this, some people say we don't, but I think we do. And I think our children and the next generation need to be told this story, and that's why that was one of the motivation to try and cut through the heavy legal jargon to present a case that I think is hopefully readable.
Can you tell us a bit about the process of writing this book then?
Well, it was a 10-year process. So when I first heard the case, in 2007, I was a legal academic at that time, working at the University of Western Australian Law School after moving over from Murdoch University. And of course, as a legal academic, you generally, part of your job is to research and write. So that was fine, but in 2010, I moved over into politics, parliamentary politics. So my time, my capacity that I had to write this book was, in as far as time was an issue, was considerably reduced. So that made it more difficult. And this case is from South Australia. I live in Western Australia, so there was a jurisdictional issue. And there was over 3,000 pages of court transcripts. So basically I had to go through all the transcript, I had to go through all the court documents, and then I had to interview some of the key players in the story. Unfortunately, Bruce had passed away by then. So that was very time-consuming, and I have to be honest and say there were times where I gave up. I didn't give up. I thought I'd given up. Thank God I didn't, because it just seemed to be insurmountable. So it was very, very time-consuming. It took a long time. There were very large periods of a hiatus, but I felt an obligation to the people I had interviewed, an obligation to Bruce, and also a very keen motivation to get this out to the public that made sure that I continue and not close the file and don't forget about it.
You mentioned that you read over 3,000 pages of transcripts and interviewed countless people in your research for the book over those 10 years. Are there any particular people or moments from the research that have stuck with you?
Yeah, look, well, I mean, I think reading the transcript itself was just, while it was at times tedious, was also at times very engaging, and there were very significant parts of the transcript that I relay in the book. But as far as interviews, I think interviewing the judge, when I commenced interviewing him, he both interviews I did with him, he was still a judge. That I found very illuminating, the processes that judges go through in their thinking, and also I think interviewing Julian Burnside, a great legal mind and figure in Australia. That was really, really important, because Julian Burnside didn't want to take on this case. It was only through the constant pleading of the solicitor in Adelaide, Jonah Richardson, who commenced the case, that he finally agreed to do the case. And I remember when he said to me, the first time I met Bruce, I could see a broken man in front of me. And that's all he really needed to know, that this man was broken. He was able to build a case around that. And the other significant saying was from Jonah Richardson, who's the solicitor who Bruce went to see in Adelaide. They were of the same age. And she said, we are the same age, but he looked at least 10 years older than me. And they were quite significant, I think, in the interviews that I did.
On a different note, Tony, back to politics a little bit. Of course, I can't not mention the still fresh election. It's a new chapter for government, federally at least. What changes do you think would be good to see from Australian governments in policies around the treatment of Indigenous families?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think the government, and obviously I'm on the Labor side, but the government's appointment of Ken Wyatt as the Aboriginal Affairs Minister, I think, was a great move. His cousin or nephew, Ben Wyatt, is his counterpart in Western Australia, who's a colleague of mine. I think that was a good move, and I think what Ken is trying to do as far as constitutional recognition and a voice are really, really important. Obviously, they have to be advocated parallel to the need to try and close the gap. What really needs to be done more than anything, I think, is that we need to try and ensure that Aboriginal children go and stay in school. As a local member of Parliament in Western Australia, what I can see is that the kids that go to school and remain in school are much better equipped to deal with life and a better chance of having a successful, fulfilling life than those that don't. And to me, that still is the major problem: is the inability to retain or improve the attendance rate of Indigenous students at school.
Is there anything more you think that could be done beyond an apology for reparations to people suffering experienced or inherited trauma from the stolen generations?
Well, I mean, this is one of the arguments made in regards to the Kevin Rudd apology, where Prime Minister Rudd ruled out compensation. Now, people say, well, compensation will never compensate adequately for the pain and suffering, and that's true. But it provides a symbolic medicinal purpose, if I could say, in therapeutic. It's a therapeutic process by the government or the state acknowledging there was a wrong and therefore putting a monetary amount to it. It's just, of course, a symbolic matter. Look, if we are working towards a reparation model, where we do now, a redress model for institutional child abuse, which is needed, there's no reason why that should not also be for the stolen generations. Now, obviously, the age of the stolen generations is, of course, of such an extent now that there's not that many necessarily there's not as many now that were, say, 10 years ago around. Whether their families should receive the compensation, I'm not sure. But I think there needs to be a reparation model, which is, if anything, symbolic and provides therapeutic healing. But I think that is important. But the apologies itself was important. But we need to go beyond that and look at how can we set up systems that will ensure that the next generation have a better chance of succeeding in life. And that's where I turn back to education. But I can see if we can put in more funding in education, that in some respect is a reparation situation. I mean, that should happen in any case, but if we can actually ensure that the next generation is better equipped, surely that's what everyone wants.
Tony, before I let you go, is there anything else that you think is important to share about this story, or any questions that I might have overlooked during our interview?
I think what's in regards to this book and this story, the Bruce Trevorrow, I think just what I would want people to take from it is that, yes, this story in many respects is very tragic. It also has a triumphal ending in some respects, but unfortunately Bruce dies at 51 years of age. But what I want people to understand, this actually did happen in Australia, and it's in the living memory of many Australians still. Obviously of an elderly nature, but this actually did happen in Australia.
Mm. Tony, thanks so much for joining me. You can grab a copy of A Stolen Life, the Bruce Trevorrow Case, at the Good Reading online bookstore, goodreadingmagazine.com, or wherever you get your books. Tony, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks ever so much.